You are muted, ma'am. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good.
I think volume can be increased a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll just try that.
Sanket,
How about how about now? Is it better?
a little bit of better.
Little bit.
यस तुषार जी.
मैम को होस्ट बना दीजिए.
यस यस मैम मैं आपको होस्ट बना रहा हूँ और मैंने रिकॉर्डिंग ऑन कर दिया है.
Okay, then.
ओके मैम, सो मैं आपको होस्ट बना रहा हूँ. राइट.
Okay.
Yes, you are the host now.
Okay.
मैम.
Good. Two people have already joined, Suresh Kumar and Mercy Joe Sebastian, I think. Good morning, doctors.
Good morning.
Good morning, doctors.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just setting up my earphones.
Yeah.
Sir, am I audible? Is it clear now?
मैम थोड़ा आवाज कम हो रहा है.
कम हो रहा है ना? हाँ.
मैम आपका सिस्टम का वॉल्यूम 100% पे है.
बॉटम में एक स्पीकर का लोगो दिख रहा होगा, वहां पे कितना परसेंट है चेक कर लीजिए ना मैम.
स्पीकर में तो है 100% है.
100% है. राइट मैम. राइट. Then ma'am, without earphone try.
I can hear her voice very clearly.
Okay, so that maybe at our end I'm not.
Yeah, at our end the voice is very, very clear.
Okay sir. Okay.
Okay.
Then
Okay.
Perfect.
So Tushar, you had your breakfast?
Not really, ma'am.
Oh. Anxiety is difficult to enjoy your breakfast.
Yeah, anxiety. And my wife and daughter, they are still taking rest, Sunday rest.
Oh, so there's nobody.
Because Mumbai, it is absolutely, sometimes it is heavily raining and sometimes it is, climate is absolutely fluctuating.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
They're just discussing yesterday, previously in the rainy season, you used to feel the chilled. But now there is no chill. If it goes rainy, then also you continue sweating.
Yeah,
So,
weather changes are there, big weather changes. Yeah.
my little daughter, she said, "Ki Papa, it is climate change." I said, "Okay, you have understood."
Yeah. I'm so glad we have a good generation coming up.
Yes.
They're so aware, yes.
So she is 12-year-old, but she understands what is climate change and what is affecting people.
Lovely.
So at least,
Yeah. Well, we have hope. Yeah.
Kirpekar sir,
Yeah, he is in a area where there is poor network.
okay, you spoke to him.
Yeah, I spoke to him. So he may not be able to join, or he will try.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Tushar, what I'm going to do is I'm going to join from my laptop, the Zoom, because I'm joined from WhatsApp, and that notification keeps coming.
Right,
That's
right.
very disturbing. I'll just rejoin. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Dr. Bhide sir joined.
Yeah, he's come. He's joined. So, hello, sir. Good morning. Dr. TSS, sir. Bhide, sir.
Good morning, Rao sir. Good morning, Bhide sir. They are setting up the audio and video.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Morning.
Good morning. Sir, your light little bit of hazy. Means, I think it is.
Is this better?
No, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a bit hazy.
Hazy.
So if you just see your camera.
That's what I
maybe
just did.
come. Yeah. Tushar, you'll have to make me the host again, I think. Am I the host now again?
Sanket. I'm not. I could not get you, ma'am.
Okay. I said you have to make me the host.
He has already made you host, ma'am.
No, in between I'd sort of exited, I think. So,
Okay.
I'm the host right now again.
Just one second.
You just check, please.
Just wondering whether this is better, less hazy.
Yeah, a little bit of better, but
Yeah.
yeah, you are the host, ma'am.
Okay, great.
You are host and I'm co-host. So when sir comes for presentation, then you make him host.
So Ajit sir will be the, you can make him the host, co-host as well.
Yesterday, there were 7 webinars going on.
TSS sir is making us study too much. Write journals, write for journals. He's making us
Please,
work too hard.
Satya, you're mute. You have to unmute. Ah.
So many webinars per day, almost like 1 to 2 at least, almost every day. Today I have 3. After this, our office bearers meeting in the night, 9 o'clock onwards.
But so your dedication is commendable. You've taken responsibility and you're there for that. It's commendable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Arun. Arun, Engine Undo.
Hi, Ajit. Good to see
Where
you.
are you?
I am in Sussex, UK.
Don't say it too loud. TSS Rao is there. He'll hear the last part of it.
I think
So
both
TSS.
Ajit and Arun, very handsome.
Hi, TSS. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you. Now you are in India or still in UK?
I'm in the UK, TSS.
UK. Oh.
Tushar?
How's the weather there, Englishman?
It's a warm, muggy morning, Ajit.
It is summer, isn't it?
It is, it is. A bit of summer rains, but not very much.
Rains mean almost nothing over there, no?
Oh gosh, no, Ajit. I mean, it doesn't pour, but it gets quite wet.
I know.
Quite wet.
That's what I mean. Unlike here where we have seasons for the rain, rain is at any time out there.
Mostly. It's a very fickle weather, which is why they keep talking about it.
Yes.
Sangeeta ma'am, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Raghu.
Good morning, Bhide sir. How are you?
All well.
Ready?
Raghu, you're mute. Maliki.
Morning.
Guten Morgen.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I think I'll put it on.
Morning, Raghu.
Morning, Ma. Hey, that's a surprise. A bit early for you.
It's 5:30 in the morning.
Oh, that's all. Psychotherapy is irresistible.
Yes, and Ajit, I must say.
Oh, thank you. You did hear Raghu last week, isn't it?
I listened to the recording.
Where is Vivek?
He's traveling.
Oh.
He's traveling to Madhya Pradesh.
Uh-huh.
And there's a network issue.
Okay.
He's not sure if he'll join us today.
Okay.
Hi, Mr. Vice President.
Raju.
He's muted.
And then you are muted.
Dr. Gurnani. He's just connecting. Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for our. Okay, someone is not able to join. Hi, Dr. Prathma. Good morning. Dr. Prathma? Screen is frozen.
I think psychotherapists are very silent group.
Morning.
No discussion before they talk.
Everyone is.
Unlike sexologists.
No, we can, of course.
So we are going to have one topic from you also. We'll have a lot of chatting going on.
Yes.
Before
So we are
session
having
starts,
psychotherapy next month, no?
Yeah.
That is the first Sunday of July.
No, we are keeping it for the second weekend. Second week.
Right.
Let me see if Dr. Gurnani was able to join.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Shashi.
Morning, sir.
good morning, sir. Good morning.
Nice to see you.
Very nice. How are you doing, sir?
Fine, fine. Just enjoying.
Gurnani has joined.
Sangeeta.
Hi, doctor. Good morning.
Good morning, Professor Gurnani. You're mute, sir.
Hello, good morning. Long
You're
time.
mute.
Yeah, I messaged to you day before yesterday, but you not responded.
You called me.
Hello, sir. Good morning, sir.
Hello, good morning, Sona. How are you? Sorry, there was some problem with the connection, so got a bit late. So, how is everything? Hello, Dr. Bhide, good morning.
Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning. Yeah. All friends. Again, going to the past. So,
Good morning, Bhide sir.
Good morning.
good morning, sir. Good morning.
Cannot forget your ad in Colgate.
I will
Time to forget it now. Time to forget it. That's the past. That's the past.
Okay,
So,
sir.
Thank you.
again, meeting the old friends, past friends. I won't say past friends, they are present also, but
Yes.
looking them from the past perspective, when we had met, I remember still when I came to Bangalore, when Dr. Bhide had organized the conference, and Dr. Narayan, our vice president, was the chief guest. I cannot forget that gathering
Yes.
and that conference. It was one of the best conferences, I should say, I had attended. So I got very high regards for you, Dr. Bhide, since then.
Thank you, sir.
Though
Very
we
kind
are
of you.
at
Dr.
very-
Raghuram was vice chairman of the organizing committee.
How to put
He was
my
also there.
photos here?
Yeah, I met Dr. Raghuram also last time when Sona had organized that psychotherapy conference in Hyderabad. Yeah. So,
Virtual background.
Dr. Rao, how are you, Dr. Rao?
Oh, good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you? Everything fine?
Doing well.
Nice meeting. Nice meeting.
Virtual background at
So-
తెలుసు నాకు ఎట్లా పెట్టాలి కానీ
I think these webinars have made us much closer than what it was earlier.
Much closer.
True.
Much closer. Much closer. They're much closer.
You only have to travel to your laptop, no one else.
In conference, when we come, there's such a huge gathering that you just can't get time to meet each and everyone. And it's just like, hello, how are you? That's all. But here, we are having a very close interaction.
Like this photo.
introduction. Yeah. So should we start? I think we are late. So should we start?
Yes, sir, we'll start straight away. So you started with a very nice theme, sir, of past, meeting past in in a new and that's our topic for today. Past tense, tense past, and dealing with the bygone. And we are very happy to have you, sir, Gurnani sir, and Dr. Bhide sir, Dr. Raghuram sir, and all other teachers here, students, and we are really happy that you all connected today. Dr. Gurnani sir, if some of you don't know, he was my professor and head of department at Sarojini Naidu Medical College. So we are really grateful he's here with because we never get enough of his learning. So thank you so much, sir, and I hand over the presentation. Thank you so much for joining us.
So when you remind me that I was a teacher, it also reminds me that how old I have grown. So in a year or so, I shall be crossing into the completing my 1 decade, and from 70s, I will be going ahead. So anyhow, today's topic, it's a fantastic topic, and the speaker is again a fantastic speaker. Dr. Bhide is one of the, I should say, leading clinician of the South Zone, and he has got tremendous interest in psychotherapy and psychoanalytics and dealing with the personal problems and dealing with the persons and individuals as a whole. If we speak to about his clinical acumen, I should say he's the emeritus professor and clinical consultant in psychiatry of the St. Martha's Hospital at Bangalore, where he has been teaching and practicing for last more than 34 years. He is our past president of the Indian Psychiatric Society. He's also past literary editor of our Indian Journal of Psychiatry. He has headed various committees, the most important being, I should say, the Ethics Committee. The chairperson of various task forces, has chaired several CMEs. There are many publications to his credit, and has conducted several continuing medical education programs. So if I keep on speaking about his laurels, I think the whole session will be devoted to that. So I won't go into much into that, but speaking about today's topic, and today's topic is very important if we look at today's scenario. For last 2 years, there has been a tremendous change in this society, the outlook of the society, outlook of the individual for his self, outlook of the individual for his family, for his society. A deep question crops up in every person's mind is that why he is working, why he is earning, what he has gained. He does not know that today or tomorrow, if one of his near and dear goes out, whether he may not catch some that dreaded infection. And if one catches that dreaded infection, what is going to happen to him? Earlier, there were joint family systems. There were many family members. Every family or every couple had 3, 4, 5 children. That was the norm. And today's norm is, till a decade back, it was 2 plus 2. Hum do, hamare do. But now even that has trickled down to we two and we are one. Even in many of my interaction with my patients, when I ask them how many children do you have, many of those, I should say, not so well-being, but of the lower state of the society, they say that, doctor, we have got only one child. And my natural question to them is that, why haven't you gone for the second one? Doctor, nahi, ek hi bahut hai. Jo hoga, ek hi kar lega. One is sufficient for us. We cannot dare to go for the second. For few, the reason is economic, but for few, it is on social structure. So the social structure is changing. When the social structure is changing, it is always a comparison with the past. What was the past? How beautiful the past was. How together we used to live. When we see at today's society and when we recall back our past, we used to remember that how playful we were, how many friends we had. And when we look at our children, oh, how lonely they are. When we feel like this, the same question may come up to a person who is not so well psychologically strong. In some turmoil state, his psychological equilibrium gets disturbed and then he ponders over his past. He tries to search some secure from that his past. He tries to analyze his past for his mistakes which he had committed. Mind only has got past to remember. If he keeps on remembering for the future, we may label him, or one may label him that he lives only in fantasy. He is not realistic. The present keeps us so preoccupied that we just go on doing our work. We don't think much what we are doing. We just have the task at a hand and we go on doing that. So when we get a leisure time, or when we are free, or when we are under some trouble, we only have the past to remember. And there are some events of the past which keep their daunt. Our parents love us. They always love us, but we usually do not remember. Only on that day, my wife was asking me, that, do you remember what was the childhood of your children? I just said, well, I don't remember how my children used to look. But if I recall back, suddenly an incident or two comes when I might have rebuked my child. Now that instance is still imbibed in my mind. But I don't remember all those love scenarios which I had with my children. So why it is that out of that ocean of love, only one straw, only one bit of that anger I still remember. So somewhere that painful memory must be affecting my relationship, my feeling, or even my own equilibrium somewhere. So it is important that we should analyze our past, try to find out if there are some lacuna left behind, and if there are some ways that we can correct those lacunas. I won't go much into that. Professor Bhide will be speaking more on that. So I invite Professor Bhide to please enchant us with his wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gurnani. Thank you for that inspiring start. It is very poignant that we are discussing a topic of exploring and dealing with the past in the context of psychotherapy at a time when we've had a lot of time hanging on our hands to explore our own past, to ponder over it, and hopefully learn from it and move forward. You mentioned that you are moving into your 8th decade very soon. I'm just a few steps behind you, sir. But I think this is much more important for the younger people. And I hope they say that the past is the best teacher. And I hope that adage proves true for them. Moving on to today's specific presentation, I must say that I'm very glad that the psychotherapy subcommittee invited me. I'm very grateful. I'm particularly glad to have over here Professor Raghuram, who really laid the foundation for this series that is going to happen in a very memorable signal talk that he gave last week. Raghu, that was delightful, and I hope I can measure up to that level. I only aspire to do that. I'm sure I cannot equate that wonderful lyrical voyage that Raghu took us on. But here we are. Choosing today's topic was something which I was hobnobbing with Sona, who actually made the invitation a couple of months ago, and we were going back and forth with a number of topics, and suddenly it struck me that this is the time to discuss the past. And I chose this topic. I called it past. Actually, it's tense past, past tense, to emphasize the fact that there are a lot of tensions that obtain in people's lives that need to be put behind us, that need to be done away with, that need Sorry, this is. So here we are. Let us talk past tense, tense past. It should be the other way around. Tense past, past tense. Exploring and dealing with the past. Today's fair. Why this topic? Our major concerns in psychotherapy. Exploring the past general principles and dealing with the past. I've taken child abuse, which is something of a favorite topic of mine, adverse childhood experience, as a learning paradigm in dealing with the past. Also, other methods of dealing with the past, including corrective emotional experience, which comes to us from the classical psychoanalysis, and other stratagems. Then some alerts. We have phenomena like the idealized past, the imagined past, then the person who compulsively goes on visiting the past. We have the phenomenon of excessive preoccupation with the past. And this preoccupation can happen on the part of the patient. And as we will see in some cases, it happens with the therapist as well. Of course, I'd like to, before I finish, mention the limitations of today's presentation, and then we'll conclude today's session. I cannot but think of anything more poetic or poignant than the voice of Mukesh Singh, "Bhuli hui yaadein, mujhe itna na satao, ab chain se rehne do, mere paas na aao." Translated, memories of bygones, why do you torture me? Leave me alone. In peace, let me live. This is a phenomenon that happens quite commonly in the consulting room, or for those of us who practice psychotherapy. And I'm seeing that increasingly, quite unlike my younger days, a lot of young people are today greatly interested in psychotherapy. These are the words of Rajendra Krishna in the movie Sanjog. Why this topic? What can the past do? The past, of course, there is a glorious past and there is a glorified past. We leave that aside for the time being. But we are talking about a past that has not been so nice, and this can contribute to emotional impairment. It can lead to unrealistic appraisals of self, of the world, and others, the future. Very nicely put before us by the pioneer of cognitive therapy, Aaron Burr. Then, unhealthy resolution of the past can lead indeed to criminal behavior, most commonly in acts of revenge. And we are seeing this increasingly, violent crime of the kind that the United States especially has been witness to, where young people with access to lethal weapons seek to make up for things that have been lost in their lives. The bitterness plays out in striking victims, most often very, very innocent victims. A bad past can also, of course, contribute to breakdown in family ties of various degrees. It can lead in the long run to a person growing up with impaired ability to be a good parent. The Gurudev said to us, "Memory, the priestess, kills the present and offers its heart to the shrine of the dead past." In other words, the past can ruin our present. And that is what we are seeking to prevent and undo to some extent. Now, in the course of my practice of psychotherapy, and much as I've been called professor, I was very delighted. There's one aspiration of mine. I never ever became a professor, but thanks for calling me an emeritus professor. I'm just an emeritus consultant now. My hospital has taken the policy of anybody who's served long enough and is now entered my age bracket gets the emeritus title. And my pet theme of psychotherapy has brought these major concerns that people come to us with. They want to correct personal inadequacies. They want to address them. They have a number of unresolved issues, what in common parlance is sometimes called unfinished business. There are a lot of negative emotions that need to be neutralized. One very common theme, which has struck me over the last 3 decades, is that a patient comes to you to have you agree with him that life has not been fair to him. So he needs a validation of his perceived unfairness. And then, of course, there are worries about the future, anxieties that, especially in the kind of scenario we have obtaining today, are very, very valid. And Any and all of these can hark back to the past. You will notice there's a mark made against 4 of the 5 areas. Those are the principal ones we will be dealing with today. Personal inadequacies. How does one realize that one is inadequate? From one's own introspection. Otherwise, the awareness can be long-standing or precipitated by some incident. Something catastrophic happens, a crisis comes in one's life, one is unable to rise to the occasion, and that brings to light one's personal inadequacies. Sometimes this awareness has to be instilled by someone else, someone who is highly observant, highly sensitive, psychologically sensitive, and or somebody who's affected by those inadequacies. Somebody has to tell this person off that, listen, I think you are too high-handed, or listen, I think your personality is causing problems to us, and that can lead to this insight into one's personal inadequacy. And what are these inadequacies? Voluntarily come and address to us. May I request muting of all other speakers except the chair and myself?
But इकडे 1 minute. Camera on आहे इथला.
Just 1 second.
हे दिसत तर नाहीये ना. अनम्यूट केलाय मी मला. कॅमेरा.
Bhide sir?
Yes?
I'll mute all. So you please unmute yourself after I mute you all, sir.
Okay.
Please, sir.
All right. So these personal inadequacies quite commonly have now become a matter of habit. Very rarely would you get acute personal inadequacies. And these include 2 which deal with management of time: punctuality, procrastination, a tendency to delay things to the last minute, then a short temper, what I call short fuse behavior, a lack of tact or diplomacy so important in getting by in life, a low confidence, a tendency to be very lazy, and a tendency not to take responsibility and dump all our work, all our responsibilities on somebody else. So these are the common personal inadequacies that I have faced as a therapist from my patients wanting to correct them. Then the next realm is unresolved issues, unfinished business, as we say, troubled relationships, unexpressed negative emotions, regret, grief, anger, anxiety, a constant fear of repercussions, internal and external, haunt the mind and disallow proper resolution. Then you can have flashbacks, as in post-traumatic stress disorder is very well described. Prejudices that have not been undone, and we are seeing a lot of this in our society currently, and a dichotomous thought process, that is thinking only in blacks and whites, not thinking of grays. But to mix metaphors, these are the red flags that should alert us to unresolved issues. The big realm of negative emotions, regret, guilt, shame, anger, anxiety, hurt, jealousy, grief. I don't know whether I'd include greed, but if we included greed, then there would be some resemblance to the Shatripu. In the Indian thought, these are the 6 mental enemies. We don't have the time to go into those. In the Christian, Judeo-Christian tradition, there are the 7 deadly sins. And in Sikhism, there are the 5 thieves that rob you of your peace of mind. So all of these kind of overlap with these negative emotions that I have chosen to highlight over here. We will restrict ourselves to the relevant of these negative emotions and where they come from. Equally important, how they might engender current dysfunction in an individual. Let's take them one by one. And this is important from our point of view as practitioners of psychotherapy. Most common regrets are about missed or lost opportunities. I lament the fact that I did not seize the opportunity. They sometimes relate to wrong decisions, made wittingly or unwittingly. I don't know why I married the person my parents chose for me. I really wanted to marry somebody else. I didn't want to marry at this age at all. Quite a common story in therapy. Or a failure to act to preserve one's dignity. This might happen in the context of having been bullied in one's younger days and then not being able to have given it back right then. And there's a regret because the opportunity has gone by. Or the bullying might happen even in adult life. Being bullied by one's boss or one's colleagues is not an uncommon story. The regret can be in the realm of education, one's career, one's choice of lifestyle. And then against romance and marriage, of course, a very, very common story in our country where we are, for a long, long time of 5 decades, been transiting, but transiting to where we don't clearly know. This regret is not by itself. It is very often accompanied by other negative emotions, particularly shame, guilt, and anger. The next important realm of negative emotions deals with guilt and shame. One's wrongdoings can sometimes be followed by insight and then flows the feeling of guilt. This might again happen because somebody points out where you've done something wrong. Some wrongdoings are totally irreversible because the person to whom the wrong is done is no longer there, perhaps not living anymore, perhaps not available anymore. And the resultant guilt can be a grievous burden through life. Many such wrongdoings are at least partially reversible, but then diffidence and prejudice, a prejudice that one cannot correct it, that one has done some grave mistake that can never be righted, can interfere with this effort to reverse that wrongdoing. Guilt and shame are often considered in the same frame, though they are quite different. Shame is a sense of humiliation that has been earned through deliberate or sometimes unintended acts. Unlike guilt, there is not so much a sense of wrongdoing as of not being able to look the world in the eye. Sharam. This is the common word that is used in our languages. The late Professor J.S. Neki famously turned our attention to this distinction between guilt and shame. It was Dr. Neki's contention that there is not an adequate word for guilt in most Indian languages. When people stretch this argument, I remember talking to Dr. Neki in Varanasi at an IIPP conference, and I came up with the idea that doshi bhavna, and he said, that's interesting, but I don't think there is a single word that covers guilt, and he was right, I guess. Nevertheless, and this is something else I shared with him, there is a notion of prayaschitta, a wanting to make good for something wrong one has done. And that's prayaschitta may be considered as penance or atonement. Then, of course, the very, very important issue of anger. Anger is a huge problem, and I am getting more and more patients who come to me wanting therapy for anger management. Ire or hostile outbursts can have many roots. Anger is incendiary in overt as well as subtle ways. Gathering frustration over a period of sometimes and sometimes accumulating over different disappointments can cause sometimes a volcanic outburst. I always take the example of Fujiyama. Fujiyama is one of the most beautiful sites on the planet, and yet it is, we must remember, a potentially active volcano, as we have all within us, and our patients have all within them, this beautiful, composed, natural scenario, which can have an outburst. A different facet, another side of the coin of anger, is passive aggression. And passive aggression is one of the most pernicious manifestations of anger. Anxiety, which is, of course, tension built into one's repertoire of emotions from an early age. It can happen that an anxious parent begets an anxious child. I am not here to speak on biological psychiatry, but I will say that a child, especially in its formative years with some degree of insight into picking up traits of parents, unconsciously as well as consciously, sees this behavior and models himself on that kind of behavior. Anxious parents tend to beget anxious children, not only because of the genes, but also because they are inappropriate models in one realm of life. On the other hand, there can be too much coercive parenting. Coercive can be subtle in the form of parents not allowing children to take their decisions out of fear that they may make mistakes. And that causes this person to be highly dependent, and in crisis-like situations, any challenging situations, the person becomes scared or anxious. On the other hand, some parents are so harsh, the child is scared to take a decision on his or her own, and that leads to an inbuilt sense of anxiety, an anxious personality, so to say. With persistent fear, one may develop a sense of diffidence and inadequacy to face life independently. And this can masquerade sometimes as laziness, avoidant behavior. Mind you, very, very importantly, when a person is highly anxious, he sometimes will mask his anxiety by putting on a front of being angry. When he has to face a situation, his outburst is not to admit that he is tense or unable to face a situation, but to react with anger, because anger is more likely to scare the other party, and the person can have his way, is what he thinks. It works sometimes, very often it does not. One issue that comes to us, and this also sort of reverberates with what we talked about unresolved issues, is hurt. Hurt results from deliberate or unintended insult or insults that have been heaped on an individual, especially in the younger years. Bullying, again, is a classical example of hurt that gets internalized so very deeply in some individuals. Hurts, notoriously, can resurface after having been subdued for a significant while. So I act like I've forgotten about whatever had hurt me for years together, but now there is suddenly some kind of reminder that brings the hurt to the fore. I must share the case of a physician patient of mine who came to me in her 40s when Bill Clinton, the famous romantic escapades of the President of the United States were coming to light. And she had had a very deep romantic relationship with somebody whom she intended to marry. And then she discovered that the person had been very quietly unfaithful while professing to be deeply in love. And that whole thing brought forth the hurt she felt at that time, and she just could not get over that particular hurt. So hurts here has resurfaced after a gap of about 20 plus years. I must also say that some hurts are nursed, even treasured, almost like a piece of prized jewelry, or say a marvelously brocaded silk sari, a Banaras sari or a Kanjivaram sari. What does the possessor of these things do? She parades the prized jewelry, parades the prized garment, but actually, in the case of hurt, they parade out something that had been of great significance in their life, because the payback is that they are going to get sympathy in the world. The play for sympathy is so strong in some individuals. They are waiting to parade their prized jewelry, their prized sari in the form of their hurts. Finally, jealousy, the green-eyed monster, visits everyone, but some seem unwittingly to invite him more. Any small situation begets in some individuals a notion of jealousy. Oh, I remember another paramedical person, whenever anybody spoke to her about some offer that was there, and her friend had managed to take that offer and buy some goodies, electronic goods as it happened. I never get such offers. They are the lucky people. Considering the rest of the world lucky while you are always suffering is one form of jealousy. Considering anybody's achievements as not quite deserved, whereas I deserve a lot and I don't get it, is the theme song of such individuals. We must remember that rivalry and envy are sometimes very benign, but they can be forerunners of grave jealousy. And one is more likely to be jealous of people from a comparable socioeconomic situation than of anybody else. Grief. Now, grief is not necessarily always negative, but it can become pathological. And this pathological grief occurs when the loss has been sudden, when one has lost a young relative due to a road traffic accident, for example, when the loss has been untimely, that is, a person has not achieved his full potential and is snatched away from your life. And if the person has not had adequate time to come to grips with the fact that one could be prepared for this departure. For example, if somebody has had cancer and there is a time duration of 2 or 3 years over which this person is given due care but is unable to survive, then that is a time for the mind to get prepared for this eventuality of losing the close relative. But if such preparedness is disallowed, then the chances of the grief being pathological are quite strong. Some allow grief to linger for unduly long periods, and that's another facet of pathological grief. Such grief is often tinged with other negative emotions, and these can include anxiety, it can include depression, it can include a feeling of guilt, and personality factors could well contribute to the prolongation of grief. What are the cumulative effects of negative emotions? These are the red flags that we should watch out for. And when we have these kind of behaviors in the presenting picture, look out for persistent negative emotions. Excessive drinking, excessive eating, and a variety of eating disorders, most particularly bulimia, tendency to fall back on self-medication and medicating oneself not necessarily with licit substances, but illicit substances. So the abuse of chemical substances, an alteration in the sleep pattern, something which I discovered in the course of therapy with 3 or 4 patients, and I presented a paper on this, excessive spending, what is called oniomania, a compulsive buying syndrome. It is as though comfort has to be sought in material acquisitions and therefore excessive spending. Altered sexual behavior, either withdrawing from sexual act altogether or indulging too much in sex because sex gives pleasure most commonly and quite quickly. So hypersexuality, people who engage in road rage, people who have become short-fused people and have frequent emotional outbursts. On the other hand, persistent negative emotions which have eroded the sense of confidence can lead a person to start neglecting his or her physical health. And peculiarly, I find this is also there, a tendency to hoard one's whatever one prizes, because again, this seeking of comfort in an erroneous way is what hoarding is all about. Then this is a favorite theme of mine, validation of perceived unfairness. For a year almost, most of the cases that came to see me wanted me to agree with them that life had been unfair. Life had been unfair to them altogether. Life had been unfair to them in very many instances or in some important area of their life. The subtext is, I want someone to agree with me. The subtext is, you, doctor, who sees so much of distress and misery, you can judge me fairly and please agree with me that life has been unfair to me. And I noticed that acknowledging that, yes, I agree, within brackets, that you perceive should not generally be said in the first instance, that life seems to have been unfair to you, itself puts the mind of this individual at rest. Because once his perceived unfairness has been validated, we can start working on how much of it is genuine, what has this person done to neutralize that unfairness, and whether the person has exaggerated the sense of unfairness in his own subjective mind. From here, we move on to exploring the past. And in exploring the past, this is a journey you and your client or patient are going to undertake. We are now transgressing into territory that is quite often uncharted. And it's an adventure that can be quite marvelous, but more so for you than for the client or patient. You have to make it attractive enough for him with the carrot dangled before him that this is going to lead to a much better life scenario for you once we have explored your past. The patient herself might well volunteer what the issues from the past are. The issues from the past might be that a mother who never instilled confidence in her. The issue might well be that she has noticed that people in her family were all short-tempered individuals. How she perceives these issues, what she has or has not been able to do about these. And this is a very insightful patient who gives you so much information. But quite often, it is an exploration that you have to undertake based on those red flags that we talked about, the kind of behaviors that we have mentioned as indicators of deep-rooted negative emotions. There is quite possibly a need to abreact. When a patient is going to explore his past, he has reactions to those realizations from the past. And I've had this scene play out in my consulting room more than 3 or 4 times, where a person who has been a very mellow, quiet sort of daughter-in-law who's been brought by a very caring husband, there's a rally of other people waiting outside, and I said, who else has come with you? My in-laws are there outside. I hate my mother-in-law. Now, this kind of an outburst, that's an abreaction, something she's not been able to say anywhere else. This comes to the fore in the context of your clinical consultation, that this abreactions mean bad reaction, of course, as we all know, and this scope for voicing that bad reaction is not given to this individual in her life, and that is our duty to accommodate that in the course of our exploring the past. Not uncommonly, the patient may just dwell on present issues, behavioral or emotional, and it is here that one needs to cultivate an astuteness to check on whether these behaviors might hark back to something from the past, especially with long-lasting negative emotions, particularly shame, guilt, and anger. There could be patterns set in motion through one's early experiences in life. In exploring the past, this is an exercise that may challenge many of the therapist's skills. This includes your patience, because sometimes you see there is something happening over here that you want the patient to dwell on, you want the patient to go back and bring the issues up, but the patient is very, very reluctant. Your patience gets tested. Your communication skills get tested at times. Your perseverance gets stretched to the limit. Your objectivity might sometimes be challenged. As a result of having a patient who is very difficult, though there is an admission of things from the past, but does not want to expose what those issues are, your empathy may run short, and your ability to discreetly tease out the issues, the Viveka Buddhi, Satsat Viveka Buddhi, the ability to discern what is important from what is not important, might also become challenged in the course of our exploring the past. A word of caution, altogether too often, the patient, as much as the therapist, can get too engrossed in exploring the past. Today we are speaking about exploring the past, but please let us never lose track of the fact that we have to come back to the present, deal with present problems without all the time dwelling on the past. I have had this instance of many well-meaning and sometimes otherwise competent therapists giving too much weight to something in the past. I'm dealing with a young lady who had a broken romance, and for a long time she was averse to meeting any potential romantic partners for a long, long time. Then she found somebody who was with whom she has a good relationship, but she has issues about panic attacks and she has issues about depression. She periodically feels suicidal in the face of cumulative crises. She is seeing a psychotherapist who insists on revisiting that broken relationship, which has been gone for more than a decade and a half, over and over again, saying, I don't think you've resolved your issues with John. Let's say John is the first broken relationship lover. And this person is at her wit's end saying that that has nothing to do with this anymore. But a therapist who's so well-meaning and so competent keeps going back to that particular story. And we should not allow this to happen in our course of exploring the past. It is useful to remember that do not have to be skeletons hidden in every cupboard. The whole model of going to the past brings to the mind that metaphor of skeletons in the cupboard. And skeletons of cupboard are usually, that metaphor is usually used in the context of concealing something deliberately. And therapists who are well-meaning sometimes will go on searching for the skeleton when there is none over there. Also, it is worth remembering that the perception of the past might not always be objective. And the therapist will have to be judicious in evaluating this perception. A young law student who turned out to be a dropout because of a number of issues in his life is seeing me for the last 2.5 years. He was being bullied by his father into taking up a science-related course. In our country, for some reason, science-related subjects and careers are given much more respect than others. And he had got on merit an engineering seat, which he was not interested in at all. His competence was in language, his competence was in arguing, and he wanted to take up law. The father did his best to dissuade him from taking up law, but the boy got a merit seat in a prestigious law college through his own effort. And then he imagined that the father will not be willing to pay the fees. The father said, anything respectable is all right. I'm an engineer. My other boy is an engineer. We have several engineers in the family. We have good mathematical brains. I thought engineering would suit you. But no. This boy has clung on to this father as an authority figure whom he must continuously challenge and rebel against. And in the course of his getting into this prestigious law school, he could not cope with the stress of it's a pretty strenuous course. Many of us in medicine imagine that we have the most strenuous course. We must give due respect to legal studies. He could not cope with the stress of this because he was continuously embittered about his father's behavior. And he built up around him, around this, the story of how harsh and unfeeling his family was. There was a grain of truth over there, which had been exaggerated to look like a silo full of horrible grain. To slightly deviate from this, the wit, cynic, philosopher Bernard Shaw had this to say: we are made wise not by the recollection of our past, quite antithetic to our theme today. But Shaw said we are made wise not by the recollection of our past, but our responsibility for our future. I think it has to be actually, very seldom can we challenge Shaw, but I think it has to be a combination of both. Because if we don't remember our past, it's unlikely we will do well in our future. As George Santayana said, those who don't remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Now, dealing with the past. The most useful paradigm to understand how to deal with the past is the realm of child abuse or adverse childhood experience. Adverse childhood experience, almost a synonym for child abuse, is of a physical nature. We know that there's a Kathy-Kemp syndrome where it was discovered that young people, in fact, between the ages of 3 and 9, had injuries that could not be explained away from the story given by the parents, and particularly multiple fractures. So those bones told a story that the parents were not willing to tell. Physical abuse is one form of adverse childhood experience, something which we have grown quite sensitive to in this country, and yet it rages on. Sexual abuse, getting young people to engage in sex much before their maturity has been reached. Some children are neglected, not given the attention and nurturance they deserve, that is child neglect. And accompanying all these, or sometimes in isolation, is this realm of the emotional abuse, where the child's emotions are tampered with sarcastic remarks, continuously angry statements, totally damaging statements like, I wish you were never born. These are the kind of emotional abuse that are heaped on individuals, and emotional abuse is quite commonly an accompaniment of the other forms of abuse. Adverse childhood experience is sometimes acute because the parent is at that moment quite stressed out, but when it has been chronic through inadequate or unhealthy parenting, then it's a different story altogether. In dealing with adverse childhood experience, there are a number of challenges that one has to face. One can have dismissive attitudes. I remember when I first made a presentation on child abuse It was in the city of Salem for our South Zone conference, and in '92, I think. And I had a very eminent child psychiatrist who was chairing my session. I said, what Dr. Bhide has told us is very interesting, but that is all the story of the West. It does not happen over in our country at all. I was shocked to hear that statement from a very eminent child psychiatrist, but there we are. A tendency to dismiss as insignificant or exaggerated any claims of child abuse still obtains even in our own profession. Negative emotions may cloud the clarity of recall, and this is something we should be prepared for. It may also interfere with the clarity of resolution. There is anger. There is survivor guilt. If one child has survived while other children have been lost in a disaster, this is what happens. If one child has not been abused while the siblings have been grossly abused, this child may carry the burden of survivor guilt. This survivor guilt is almost always unwarranted guilt because you're feeling guilty that life has been kinder to you than it has been to others. Anxiety is another negative emotion which interferes with clarity of recall of what had gone wrong. And anxiety can also interfere with undoing the damage that has been done. Also, some children, especially when they've been abused by a loving relative, have an ambivalence in revisiting the traumata. Actually, my mother's a very nice person. It's a different thing that she pinched me all over my thighs, the story that I witnessed at the beginning of this year. But that can happen. And then there is a stuck record, a repetitive rumination over something that has gone wrong, and thus unable to get over it. And in this case, the law student pitched this bill as well. In dealing with adverse childhood experience, there should be adequate time for ventilation. Active empathy, it is not enough to just feel it. It is important to convey it. It is important it must reach the patient. And sometimes a gentle physical assurance goes a long way. Of course, there is a slippery slope of boundary violation. One must be careful about that. Charting the aftermath and learning to control negative spirals is something which we should be aware of. And then there are retributive measures that we must resort to. We must first assess the necessity for retributive measures, the practicality. Now, with the POSCO, there is also the need for the legal angle. And what strategy are we going to use to get back to neutralize what was bad from the past in the adverse childhood experience? In corrective measures, we can help this child practice mindfulness and learning to practice forgiveness, and a very interesting Japanese concept called kintsugi. So let's dwell a little on forgiveness and on kintsugi. Now, forgive and forget. I remember in my school days, in the model science, we had these chapters, and we had a chapter called Forgive and Forget. They are uttered in the same breath very, very commonly. But in fact, they are a little different, and they are both not easy, they are difficult. Now, forgiving is a willful act. Forgetting, on the other hand, is a far more directly neural happening. It has to happen at the level of the brain. Certain marks that have been made in our nervous system have to be erased, and therefore it's a challenging task, and it cannot happen on its own. Also, forgiving becomes easier when it is sought. When somebody says sorry and sees that sorry seems to be genuine, it is much easier for the person who has been offended to forgive than it would otherwise be. It takes a huge largeness of heart to be able to forgive when forgiveness has not been sought. And such largeness of heart precludes patients who come to us in very many instances. Through the course of therapy, they may even evolve more than you and be able to have that large-heartedness to forgive when forgiveness has not been sought. This interesting phenomenon I was made aware of by a non-Indian psychiatrist, kintsugi, restoring the cracking or even the cracked crockery. In Japan, broken objects are often repaired with gold. This is molten gold that is slowly put through the cracks that are there, and the flaw is seen as a unique piece of the object's history. The gold is important because gold is precious, but this has again been countered by saying that you are parading, like the Kanjivaram sari or the prize jewelry we spoke of in a different context earlier, that it is being paraded as something for sympathy. No, not necessarily so, but it could be that. many people would rather not
शेषा
have.
अच्छा तो चल बारिश होगी जाते
So you need not parade your hurts in the form of gold stars, but it's a good idea to see that you can be whole with a precious strategy. That's what Kintsugi really ought to convey to us. But moving beyond this paradigm of adverse child, can you please mute yourself? Yeah. So moving beyond the realm of adverse childhood experience, there is something called corrective emotional experience. And this came to us from Franz Alexander, who we remember for psychosomatic disorders. Alexander and his student, James Morton French, in 1946 came up with this model of corrective emotional experience. And I think this model serves a very, very good purpose. Now, with neuroscience, especially radiological neuroscience having advanced considerably, we know that it has a neural basis. What is happening over here is we have to work towards a memory reconsolidation. It involves a skilled therapist and a therapist fulfilling the Rogerian criteria of complete respect for the patient, a willingness to accept what the patient has to say, and standing in a detached fashion yet involved with the patient, a safe environment, and a freedom to express and react. We spoke about abreaction. I'm sorry if I shocked some people with my demonstrated abreaction of the daughter-in-law, but that is the kind of ability this person must have. And then when this has happened, it takes the shape of ventilation, where somebody comes out and talks about what has been bothering him or her. We detoxify this individual, not at all unlike what we do with people who have come for treatment for alcoholism. Exploring of options that will greatly mitigate revisits to the past, because revisits to the past in the long run can be quite draining, and they drain the stability, the growth, and the creativity of the individual. So these are the steps to go through in corrective emotional experience. In dealing with the past, one must learn strategies to distract oneself. Such and such memories continuously gnawing at my mind. We're getting away with this with some reading, which is of a lighter nature, or music, which is of a mellow nature. Distract me from that pain. Learn to do that. We're not burying anything. We're not turning into ostriches, burying our heads under the carpet, but we are burying our heads under the sand. But we are learning not to dwell on the draining themes for too long. Taking up creative pursuits, and this is related to the next phenomenon of cultivating sublimation. Write poetry about what has been disturbing you. Write short stories about the angst in your life. These are strategies that we can encourage our patients to engage in. Also, taking up altruistic projects, especially in the context of unresolved issues from the past, unfinished business, where guilt has played a major role. To take up projects which deal with where you went wrong. For example, providing for working with a fire shelter, working for safety first measures, taking up animal shelters. These are the kind of altruistic pursuits which help people cope much better with their past when they have these negative emotions dwelling in them. And sometimes when the negative emotions are very, very deep rooted, long way in putting the past beside. We have to neatly package it and keep it on the shelf. We can't get rid of the past. Nobody can totally undo the past. In the context of psychotherapy, we can consider the patient situation like that of a long shut musty room. And what we are doing over here is opening out the window. Ventilation is the key word over here. Whatever is musty, smelly, dusty for a long time is allowed to refresh through the blowing in of fresh wind. Ventilation, very commonly, is accompanied by abreaction and allowing for emotional reaction or outbursts. Breakdowns and sobbing is something which we have to accommodate in the course of our practice of psychotherapy and build it into your repertoire. Some words of caution. There are limitations to today's presentations, I must humbly confess. There is the idealized past, there is the imagined past, there is the vilified past, there is a compulsive visitor of the past, and there is a therapist overvaluing of a patient's past. We already spoke about the last theme, so I won't dwell on it. The lady who was preoccupied with John's having broken away from say, Meera, and that's something which should be avoided. Confessions of an ignoramus or a disbeliever, you might say, strategies that many practice that seem to work for them, but I do not. One is hypnosis. To me, hypnosis smacks too much of magicality, but I know that a friend's father, who's an eminent psychiatrist in Chennai, Dr. Fernandez, practices hypnosis, and I've had the occasion to review his book, and he seems to have done wonders with people who have had issues from the past. EMDR, I am perhaps a little biased, but I neither practice it nor do I refer to people who practice EMDR. Strategies that I used to use quite commonly was chemical-assisted narco-analysis. For a variety of reasons, I have practically abandoned this. I have today not dealt with the neural roots of the past stored in the mind and the havoc that this past can cause, not out of disdain, but humbly, because my expertise in that area, in that fascinating realm, is rather limited. There are a number of overlaps, I acknowledge, in the different facets that I have covered. For example, the negative emotions. My classifications and typologies are only for convenience in grasping this vast subject. I have deliberately avoided, as far as possible, references to particular brands of psychotherapy, whether psychoanalysis or behavior modification or cognitive therapy or cognitive, as it is, hardly anybody speaks of a cognitive therapy anymore without saying CBT. My own attraction lately has been to revisit something that I read about in my early days as a consultant, that is reality therapy or Glasser. But eclectic is my way to go. The past idealized, the paradise lost paradigm, that everything was so fantastic in the past. Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away, sang John Lennon. Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. Now it looks as though they're here to stay. Oh, I believe in yesterday. It's silly to continue to believe only in yesterday. Damn it, you've got today and you are losing it because today is slowly eating into your tomorrow is the kind of message that we have to give to these people. Still on the theme of the past idealized, Kishore Kumar sang this beautiful number which said, "Koi lota de mere beete hue din the mere pyare pal chin. Main akela to raha, mere saath saathi kahi, ek आंधी सी उठी जो भी था लेके गई. आज मैं ढूंढूं कहाँ खो गए जाने किधर, बीते हुए दिन वो हाय प्यारे पल छिन, कोई लौटा दे मेरे बीते हुए दिन." Hankering for a past that is never going to come back, in the beautiful words of Shailendra from the movie Dur Gagan Ki Chhaon Mein. Then there is an imaginary past. This is dangerous territory. It may have delusional underpinnings, and it may overlap with what has been called pseudologia fantastica, which is usually used in a different context, but I think it fits in as one part of the jigsaw puzzle over there. In the unforgettable words of Harold Pinter, he has a character in the play Old Times Say This: there are some things one remembers even though they may never have happened. There are things I remember which may never have happened, but as I recall them, so they take place. An imaginary past is usually summoned up by a patient who wants to justify his or her behavior, saying that this wrong had been done to me, or somebody treated me unfairly in this fashion, or I justify my high-handedness today because people deserve it for X, Y, Z reason. And this is all a realm of fantasy. And everyone has to be very, very careful in discerning this. Look out in such instances always whether there are delusions. Sometimes there are, quite often there aren't. Then, continuing my literary Ancient Mariner. And in the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, what you have is a seaman who was an outstanding captain who was out on a voyage. And in the course of the voyage, for absolutely no reason, he shoots a lovely big bird flying across the sky. That's an albatross. And the fact that he has injured something innocent works a guilt into his mind so badly that he goes through a harrowing experience with his fellow sailors. The ship goes through terrible experiences at sea, faces still seas, faces storms, and is finally, in a shipwreck fashion, the mariner comes to the shore. Once he comes to the shore, he has now been cursed by forces that are, in this poem, preternatural. He's compelled to tell his story of what happened to him to anybody who is willing to listen. Here you see the ancient mariner has cornered somebody who was actually in a hurry to go to a wedding. He corners the wedding guest, sits him down, and starts narrating his story. He just can't stop. This is not an uncommon story in our clinical practice. There are people who will want to revisit their traumatic past over and over again. Sometimes they eat into your time schedule, sometimes they eat into your psychic energy. We have to be careful not to let those things happen on the one hand. On the other hand, we need to shake these people up and say, hey, move on. That story is over. Do something about undoing your guilt rather than going on talking about it. This modern philosopher recently passed away, and this line from him is very memorable. A memory is what is left when something happens and does not completely unhappen, said Edward de Bono. In conclusion, I'd like to quote this poem from a young poetess. I got this from the net. The past is the past for a reason. That is where it is supposed to stay. But some cannot let it go. In their heads, it eats away. And this is the story of many of our patients. What we need to tell them is what happens in your lifetime happens for reasons unknown. So you have to let the cards unfold. Let your story be shown. It's a very long poem. These are the two verses that most appeal to me. In summary, the past is often a millstone around the neck of one who seeks our help. This millstone comes in various shapes and sizes. Sometimes the carrier of the millstone is herself not aware of the weight that she has been bearing. Sometimes she exaggerates it, but we've talked enough about that. It is our job to help reduce this burden and to lighten not just the weight of the millstone, but the heaviness of life's foibles in this individual. I'd like to conclude again, harking back to Sine Hind, what people unfortunately call Bollywood. Murmur ke na dekh, murmur ke. Don't keep turning back, revisiting your past all the time, is what this particular verse says. I'd like to thank you for your indulgence, for being here today. I have conveyed to you a very personal account of what I think is important from the point of view of understanding and trying to undo the past. I'd like to thank the Indian Psychiatric Society, particularly the psychotherapy subgroup, subcommittee, headed by Dr. Raghuram, Dr. Vivek, Dr. Sona, Dr. Shah, and Dr. Prathama. I thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'd be delighted to take questions and comments afterwards. And I thank all of you for your being here. I look forward to an interactive session at the end.
Well, it was a very nice presentation by Dr. Bhide. I think we all enjoyed it, and we were totally engulfed in that. We were not able to recall back our past, nor look for the present or for future, and we had forgotten where we are. We are just mesmerized by the talk of Dr. Bhide. I had the impression that a psychotherapist should be a good surgeon. But today what I learned from Dr. Bhide is that a psychotherapist has also to be a good goldsmith. He carves his cravings, the beautiful art on those broken hearts, the broken mind, broken feelings. So a surgeon will go into the depth, will find out by his acumen that where the block is, will cut that, remove that. But we have found that many surgeons, when they suture back the abdomen, they leave behind some scars. But a psychotherapist will even cure those scars and will carve with this beautiful art in such a way that even those scars will appear as a beautifying spots. So it was really a very nice presentation. We have got some more questions answered, but I think Dr. Sona has kept something for 15 minutes break, which she will explain what we are going to do. But I would like to give thanks to all the Indian Psych Society and the psychotherapy section, Dr. Sona, Dr. Raghuram, the president, in charge convener for this section of the IPS, Dr. Sangeeta, but I give mic to the Dr. Sona to proceed ahead.
The good news is, so we can all continue our discussion. The bad news is our rapper, I think, is making use of his Sunday, so he's not going to join us. So I'm very sorry, but we promise you another event next time. But we are really mesmerized by Dr. Ajit, and we'd like to continue the session. Of course, if you want a 5-minute break, we can have
Yes,
some.
I'll just go get my cup of coffee and come.
Yes, so we can have just 5 minutes break, and then we cannot get back. And we have some very good therapists here. We have so many questions to ask them, and let's just go with our interaction in 5 minutes. In 5 minutes.
So we have 5 minutes. We're back. After 5 minutes, we're back.
Yes.
Dr. Sangeeta wants to say something.
Yeah.
Sure, sir.
Okay then.
Time to scout.
Well, it was very good melody saxophone music. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sona. So
Thank
I
you,
was
sir.
glued to my chair. I couldn't take that interval of 5 minutes even.
Oh. Okay, so it's over to you. We'll have people asking questions, and of course, you'll have a lot of questions too, and a lot of things to say. We want to hear what you have to say as well.
I will like that there are many questions in the chat box. So I think we should turn our attention to Dr. Bhide, that he will enchant us with his expertise in this field. What I remember from my past is that when I was doing the post-graduation, at that time, that my teacher of psychotherapy was Dr. Ratan Singh, and Dr. Ratan Singh had training under Dr. Volpe. So he was a direct pupil of Dr. Volpe. And so he was very much fascinated with the behavior therapy aspect. So he taught us the behavior therapy model. But vis-a-vis, we were enchanted with the Freudian concept. Because before joining my post-graduation, because I took at that time it was a house job. So my house job was under Dr. B.K. Vyas, and he, you can say, was a great proponent of Freud. So because he had taken his training from the US. So I was between the two schools of thought. On one, my brain had been tuned for the psychoanalytic, and my teacher was a behavioristic. So I learned the behavior therapy aspect and perhaps taught that to even my students. But I won't say that psychoanalytic concept could be washed away from my brain, and they are still there today. In today's practice also, when patients come to us, we may not be practicing that traditional classical psychoanalysis, but we still deal with the past. And today's scenario, when the time is short, people do not have much time devote to the psychotherapist. They do not have much time to be away from their profession or job, their responsibility. They want a quick cure. And what we would like to listen from Dr. Bhide is that concising that all that therapeutic concepts into a time-limited manner, so that it's a crisis intervention where you can give a direct direction to the person or the patient or the client how to deal with that life-threatening situation. So there are a few questions. Dr. Bharti Jan is asking, sir, she is asking that, may I know in detail what psych detoxification is? Wonderful, sir. Many thanks for the great session. So she wants to know what is psychotherapeutic detoxification.
The idea is the common theme between detoxification, which we tend to use more in the context of chemical addiction, is that you have a geographic separation from the substance which is causing you the damage. That's first. The second thing that you have in detoxification is that you have withdrawal symptoms that are addressed. There, the analogy has stops, because over here, this person needs to be away from whatever is causing the toxicity in his life, internally and externally. So, moving away from toxic people is very important in the context of psychological detoxification. If you cannot move away from them internally, you cut them out of your horizon as much as possible. That is the geographic separation that is common. That is why in the course of detoxification, we hardly ever do it as an outpatient procedure in the context of alcoholism, for instance. We tend to say that a brief period of hospitalization will be useful. Here, during the therapy, you have to reinforce this person's ability to be able to garner inner resources to keep these people and thoughts about them and negative messages from them at bay as much as possible. Where we have benzodiazepines to take care of the withdrawal tremors, where we have benzodiazepines to induce sleep, because insomnia is a common withdrawal symptom, we have other strategies that can be used for, that's why I mentioned practicing distraction, practicing creative pursuits. These need to be strengthened over a period of time in the course of psychological detoxification. I must say that the image of detoxification is important, but it has its limits.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Mohan Isaac has given us one of his valuable input, and what he says is that forgive and you will be forgiven. Dr. Bhupendra,
those who want forgiveness must learn to forgive. That is very true in all our lives. I think first enunciated by St. Thomas Aquinas.
Dr. Bhupendrajit Varaj wants to know that in biosocial theory of emotions in DBT, it is discussed how the person seen as invalidating may not know better. However, I guess all this first requires a good rapport, right time for right insight, and helping them see what is their goal. Would you say goal setting is a must for frequent reorientation to goals?
Goal setting should be an important concern for us. It should become an important concern for the patient over the first 1 or 2 sessions. People have come with, they come with an agenda, they never come without an agenda. Some of the agenda is very expressed to them, some of the agenda is hidden for them also, and we have to slowly uncover it. But if you start with goal setting, saying that, okay, we're here, is this what you want? This kind of a mechanistic approach that you want the spluttering in your car to be stopped, that's a mechanics approach. I don't think we should take too rigid a stance on this in the first consultation. By the second or third consultation, we should insist on some degree of goal setting. Now, I deliberately did not dwell, DBT is one of the kinds of therapy that I find is a highly accommodative therapy of various schools. It has psychoanalytic principles, it has behavioral principles, it has cognitive principles, it has reality principles, as I'm discovering all over again. Plus, it gives a lot of scope to alternative medicine. So I have had a personal correspondence with Linehan to say this, and she says that I don't think you've understood it, you should undergo our training. So that's how it is. But DBT specifically for certain types of personality disorders is a good strategy on the whole, because it incorporates a number of strategies from other classical schools. It was very nice to know that you are a student of Volpe. I'm not anybody with that background. And I was only interested because Volpe and Freud actually had a correspondence, a very friendly dueling that went into them. But I'll say this much, that behaviorists and psychoanalysts, the place where they meet is the past. Both give plenty of emphasis to the past. Past conscious learning, past subconscious learning, or entirely mental processes related to the past. That's where the discernment occurs.
Dr. Ratan Singh took his training from Temple University. And so after taking training from Temple University, he came to BHU, Varanasi, where he was there for 10 to 15 years. And it was my luck that during all that time only I was there and took training under him. Unfortunately, Dr. Ratan Singh expired only 1.5 months back. So, well, Dr. Shilpa wants to know, she has a few questions. She wants to know how many sessions per month you will prefer. How many sessions per month?
This numerical criteria is something which baffles me a little. 2 very good sessions of 45 minutes might amount to 6 30-minute sessions for somebody else. It's a quality of work, the quality of rapport, the quality of back and forth flow that is important more than the number of sessions. But depending on a particular case, given one's own personal style, one might evolve, saying that short of other impediments, I would need about 4 or 5 hours with this individual. I would need about 10 sessions of half an hour at least, but always that clause about other impediments coming in the way. Okay. a number of other impediments. Your personal life, the patient's personal life can be huge impediments. Sudden change of expectations, other people visiting and muddying the waters wittingly or unwittingly are all complicating factors we must, in psychotherapy, more than any other medical therapy, take into account.
Then Dr. Madhav wants to know, please give us your insight on how to go ahead with eclectic therapy while dealing with a couple of marital discord.
Eclectic therapy is not a single therapy. Please remember that. You take certain behavioral principles of reward and punishment. The punishment should never be corporal punishment of any kind. It should be deprivations, if at all there is a punishment, and it should be self-imposed deprivations in many contexts. That much from behavior therapy. Reward yourself for good behavior. A simple dietitian's regimen. Be very strict with your diet for 6 days. On the 7th day, you can splurge as much as you like within limits. In the sense, as much as you like within limits is sort of a oxymoron. Sorry for that. But on the 7th day, you can take liberties. But 6 days, will be very strict with your diet. In a similar way, reward yourself for something good you've done. All right? You've stuck to the diet for 6 days, 7th day. So you allow yourself a break. You allow yourself some leisure time activity which you could not accommodate because of your tendency to procrastinate, which we are working on right now. Psychoanalytic principles, more than any other psychoanalytic principles, I think it's our defense mechanisms and coping styles that are important. Healthy coping styles and defense mechanisms to be strengthened, unhealthy ones to be recognized and slowly learn to undo them and not take resort to them. Those are the basic psychoanalytic principles. Cognitively, recognize faulty cognitions, learn to put them in, and I find the overlap between rational emotive therapy and cognitive therapy so huge, I don't know that they're really different kinds of therapy. So rational emotive therapy was the forerunner, cognitive therapy was given great weightage by somebody who was extremely frustrated with psychoanalysis, and it's mumbo jumbo, and there is such a part to psychoanalysis, no denying that. Recognize patterns of your thinking that need correction from where you're, in a sense, jumping to conclusions. So don't jump to conclusions. So this is the kind of eclectic therapy that I would, there is no single therapy called eclectic therapy. Eclectic is an approach where you accommodate different types of therapy.
While talking about marital therapy, one incident comes to my mind and what Dr. Bhide was saying about the feeling of hurt. The infidelity of idea of infidelity. Hello. The idea of infidelity.
I request everybody to mute themselves unless you're asking a question or making a comment.
Sir, just 1 second. I'll again mute all. So everybody please listen. If you want to speak something, please unmute you and speak.
Yeah, hello.
Sir, you please unmute yourself once I mute you. Yeah, muted all. Gunnani sir, please unmute yourself.
I unmuted.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. No, it's okay. We are communicating.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So while talking about the marital therapy, one of the main issue which crops up or usually comes in the marital therapy is the idea of infidelity. I won't say delusion, but a disbelief or a feeling of hurt when one spouse does some mistake or does some act which the other partner feels she should or he should not have done. I remember one instance, must be about 30 years back. The wife had attended a marital party and there one of her relatives asked her to dance with her. And she danced. The husband could not tolerate this thing that why his wife was dancing with her, though he was relative, the why she was dancing with him. And this started a heated exchange between the two and a marital turmoil. Every day the husband will keep on taunting her that why did you do that act? Why did you dance with that guy? When you knew that I do not like that person, still you took the courage, strength to dance with him. So much so. And I just thought that it is the problem of the husband because he was unnecessarily suspecting on the character of the wife. So I kept on working with the husband, trying to console him or trying to give him the correct direction, all those things. But the wife was so much frustrated by his daily nagging that one day she committed suicide. So in psychotherapy, when we deal, I think we should be cautious that we should, especially marital therapy, when we find that one partner has got problem, or we try to find the fault in one person and try to reshape him. We also should be careful for the other person that is he or she not undergoing any other emotional turmoil. Well, now Dr. Kumar Kamble wants to know, he says that some patients find that when they are faced with repetitive thoughts about their past, writing down their thoughts and destroying the paper, tearing, burning, etc., is cathartic. Is such an approach acceptable and to be encouraged, or is best avoided?
It works for many people. It does not work for some. Some people are good writers, some are not good writers. And I don't mean writers in the sense of being an author of a paper or an article or a book, but getting it out of your system and putting it on paper. I don't know that you necessarily need to destroy the paper, but as a symbolic gesture, it might work wonders. It is worth considering. But insisting, I do a lot of journal therapy. I believe a lot in journaling in my personal life as well as in therapy. I believe in journaling. And I think journaling is a very good strategy. I used to be very insistent 20 years ago that everybody should write a journal. So much so in Canada, some of my patients used to call me the diary wala doctor, you know. You can't go to the doctor unless you're going to write a diary. I've come a long way from there, and I realized that many people are not comfortable with writing a diary. But if something has been gnawing at your mind, something negative, some injustice that you are trying to neutralize and you're not successful about it, I have noticed that some people write it down, get it out of their system. They have articulated their thoughts, perhaps for the first time in this negative realm, and got rid of it. Whether they burn it or tear it or throw it away, it's up to them. But they want to keep it, so long as they don't trot it out like the prize jewelry or the Kanjivaram sari, it's fine. They should not revisit that over and over again. In the context of your story, that was quite it really had a twist in the tail. I'm very sorry to learn that the lady committed suicide. It's really an extreme step, but I can only surmise that her perception of torture must have been quite severe. My stance now is that if your relationship with your life partner is precious enough to you, forego any other relationship which your life partner wants you to forego. Most commonly, a rival partner, a rival romantic involvement. I am very clear, I am not unfaithful to my wife, but my wife is very suspicious about my secretary, about my colleague. I must stop relating at an intimate level with my intimate meaning, even social cordiality with these individuals. If my relationship with my wife is very important to me, that must be sacrificed. If it's not important, the whole story is very, very different. I have seen that this kind of strategy works very commonly. Sometimes it has led people to introspect and decide that they don't want to remain in the marriage because the other partner is just too demanding of constant demonstration of fidelity. Then the stance is very different. There is such a thing as creative divorce. There is such a thing as an amicable divorce, which can happen. Amicable, of course, has its limits, but there we are.
Yeah. Well, what question Dr. Kumar was asking and Dr. Bhide replied, this reminds me of one instance. Well, I would like to say one caution also, that many of the manic patients, or well, not manic, but hypomanic, they do not have the full-fledged symptoms of hypomania, but one of my patients had the habit of keep on writing and writing and writing. And one day, the parents brought that boy to me, and he had this much thickness of the registers, I should say 5 or 6, or equal to more than double the size of Guru Granth Sahib, written on various registers. And he brought all his treasure to me. Well, doctor, he just keeps on writing all these registers and will not allow anyone to read those registers. Then I persuaded him to, okay, just give me one register so that I can go through that. He gave me one. Well, doctor, I will come tomorrow and take it back. I said, okay. And the next day, I just took it from him just to see what he might have written, though I knew what should be there. But very punctual, the boy came next day and asked me back, well, doctor, give me back my death register. So they hold it, they keep on writing and writing and writing. And they do not have any, he was not in any other symptom, but all day his job was, his function or duty or his work was just keep on writing. So many times some biological disorder may also disguise itself in the form of some behavioral problem, and we must be cautious.
Very true. This is a form of compulsive behavior which very commonly has an organic basis also. When people compulsively go on writing, and that what is written is not of great emotional import in most instances. There may be exceptions, but by and large, this is a variation of what we call verbigeration in phenomenology, where words are just flowing out and out and out. I have a young man, not young man now, he's 48. He writes letters to whoever is in power at the state, at the center, at various ministries, and goes on writing letters to them. He has not completed his collegiate education. He works in his brother-in-law's small scale industry. But his favorite pastime is writing these letters. Every day he mails 5 or 6 letters. And the postmaster said, there was some kind of award for people who write very regularly and use the postal services. He got that award. But his mother was at her wit's end to stop him from writing and spending unnecessary money on postage all the time. And so in your case, it was the registers. Since I used to practice, I used to use journaling as a strategy in my psychotherapy quite a lot. There are people who come to me again with stacks of diaries with a lot of meaningless stuff, or pondering over the same thing over and over and over again. Sometimes it's a fantasized love. This person had written love story upon love story upon love story, sorry, love letter upon love letter upon love letter, which he never had the guts to post. And it was something like the Clarenball syndrome, that he could only aspire to have any kind of relationship with him. Insight enough to realize that he should not mail those letters, but it gave him some sense of temporary fulfillment to write those letters. I think those need a different kind of approach, and probably not so much the therapy towards what they have written.
I won't take many more questions, but one or two more. So what Dr. Naveen wants to know is that, as you very rightly said, Dr. Bhide, the purpose of digging into the past is exploration, evaluation, relooking at it from its current relevance, offering methods and opinions for the same. With definite goals will go a long way in, okay, it is his comment, I think. It was Dr. Gurvinder Singh, perhaps. Respect says, you have mentioned about mindfulness in children. How much is effective? Your experience in mindfulness-based intervention. Mindfulness-based intervention. From Dr. Gurvinder Pal, from GMCH, Chandigarh.
Yeah, so I came upon mindfulness serendipitously. I went for a course of Vipassana meditation. And in the course of reading about Vipassana meditation, I finally chanced upon mindfulness, which had been existing for a much longer time than I realized it had been there. So basically, mindfulness is being in the here and now, which is the theme of many writers on self-improvement, including that power of now and so forth, and being somatically conscious. So scanning your whole body is what we do in Vipassana meditation. Over here, you are aware of all thoughts that come, treat them as objects and be detached from them is the basic message of being mindful, and allowing tranquility to pervade where it existed in very small measure, if at all, and you allow the tranquility to get the better of yourself. With children, if you start using terms like mindfulness, you've had it. But if you tell them, now focus on your breath, while you're focusing on your breath, think of what's happening around you and how you can hear the twitter of the birds, or you can hear a dog barking in the distance, and you can hear the traffic sounds. And these are all sounds that make up our life. We don't want much traffic. Now we're in the middle of a situation where there is very little traffic, let's think about what a wonderful silence we have obtaining to us. This kind of thing with children does wonders. And one has to spend, I would think, 12 to 15 minutes in this once a day with children. It's more than enough. That is a kind of practice which teaches you a sense of detachment, which teaches you a sense of internalizing tranquility, and thereby some degree of objectivity in your life.
Good. But Dr. Naveen wants to know, and a very important question. Is Eric Berne's concept and the transitional analysis still relevant today?
Very much. I think there are very excellent practitioners of TA even today. We are one of the headquarters, if I'm not mistaken, for TA training is in Bangalore. Eric Berne's concept actually, to my mind, and it still remains an issue of minor bone picking with some practitioners of TA, is Freud transferred onto a different language, that's all. Because id, ego, and superego, and parent, adult, and child are very similar to id, ego, and superego, to my mind. And understanding transactional analysis, especially going beyond Berne to Harris, who gave the concept of I'm okay, you're okay, I'm okay, you're not okay, I'm not okay, you're okay, I'm not okay, you're not okay, which is the worst paradigm of which is the worst of the interactional states of all, is very useful. To recognize these patterns, to work at them is useful. Berne's other contribution about how we have set patterns of behavior that he called games, and recognizing what games we are getting into. Games People Play was his classic monograph, and that got updated into Games Alcoholics Play. And then for the socially anxious, he wrote a wonderful book called What Do You Say After You Say Hello? All these books have used the basic model that the personality is composed of a parent component, an adult component, and a child component. And the interaction of these three, and each component is necessary. It isn't as though you must be all parent or all adult. The adult is by and large the more mature stance of a component of your personality are important, and they can all lead, give meaningful contribution to your life. But most of us are wanting to be in the adult frame. We must let the child in us also out sometimes, as the modern cliche goes. Sometimes the child gets the much better of the other components, and that can be dangerous.
Thank you, Dr. Bhide. There are many, many more questions, but I think we have got only around 10 or 12 minutes left. So before I hand over the mic to the organizers, I'd like to give my own feeling and concept that to be a good psychotherapist or psychiatrist, we should understand the vibration of that feeling or the tuning of the person. We need not to go just by the concept that I have to follow a Freudian concept, or I have to follow a behavioristic concept or transitional concept. I remember one of my patients, she is a case, I'm saying she is because she is still there and she is with me. It was about 30 years back. She's a case of obsessive compulsive disorder. Now I had the two concepts, whether I should deal with her in a behavioristic way, because I was newly passed out and had a lot of energy and enthusiasm to practice the behavioristic approach, and or to just go on talking with her and trying to give, well, I should say I was not very much well trained in psychoanalytic concept, but behavioristic concept we had been taught. So one day I took the chance, I went to her house, that rather than doing that flooding session in the clinic, I went to her house and did the flooding at her house with a real life situation. And I should say that I did it for 2 or 3 times, and the lady is completely okay for last 30 years. My only task or trouble of going to her house and asking her to do some flooding sessions in the house in a real life situation cured her of that obsessive habit which she was having for last many years. And she is still keeping well till today, because the family member was so well, I won't say mesmerized, but they were so grateful to me that they have developed a kind of family relations with me, and so I still close relations with them. But If I had gone thought of some psychoanalytic concept or any other concept like transactional or anything, I don't know in how many years that lady might have been cured. I won't say the behavioristic approach is going to be helpful in each and every person, or psychoanalytic or any other approach is going to be helpful in each and every one. We have to understand the curing of the person, that how, in what way, or what therapy is going to help him. It has to, a good psychotherapist has to be like that saint. जो there are sects when the guru gives them some mantra, कि ये मैं आपको मंत्र देता हूँ, ये आपके लिए है. He tunes some mantra in his ear, and the person feels that this is unique for him. The same way that mantra has to be specific for each person, each patient, and the psychotherapist has to decide that what mantra should be given to that person. With this, I would like to end my part, and I will convey my thanks to Dr. Bhide for speaking so vast on this topic. I'm thankful to Professor Raghuram sir. I'm thankful to IPS, our Dr. Rao, and Dr. Sangeeta is there. And most of all, I would like to convey my thanks to Dr. Sona Kakkar for organizing this, taking the pains of organizing this very beautiful session. And now I hand over mic to the organizers, Professor Raghuram, Dr. Sona. Please, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gurnani sir. Thank you, Dr. Bhide. It was so an eye-opening session. And, we grew up with this concept that psychiatrists don't know therapy and they don't read anything beyond DSM-4, and it's all about biological psychiatry. And we're all seeing what a treasure of information we have amongst our psychiatrists like you, Dr. Bhide, Dr. Gurnani, Dr. Raghuram, and so many, Dr. DSS. We have so much here that we have to learn from you. We're so grateful that you could be part of this session for all of us. Thank you so much. And over to Dr. Prathama for the vote of thanks. Dr. Prathama.
Can I say?
Yeah, please.
Yes, I'm
Before
here.
Pratima,
Can
can
you
I-
use my privilege? Can
I
you
say
hear me?
1 minute? Can I say something? Can I add on?
Yes, sir. Please.
Pratima? Yeah?
Yeah, Dr. Raghuram, sir, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Ajit, for a very informative.
Please.
Sorry?
So you can go ahead, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Ajit, for a very informative overview of the role past plays in psychotherapy. See, as we are all aware, focus on the past is an essential ingredient in any form of psychotherapy. What it differs is the depth of inquiry and the focus of inquiry. See, in classical psychoanalysis, the intensity of exploration into the past is very extensive. The contrary is in supportive psychotherapy. And various kinds of psychotherapy has evolved recently in terms of identifying what should be the focus in the past. For example, the trauma-focused psychotherapy, which essentially addresses some of the issues that you highlighted in terms of what happens in early childhood experiences. The past is not really in the past in psychotherapy. What is the most important and beautiful process in psychotherapy is that the past is reenacted in the present in psychotherapy. And that is the essence of psychotherapy. When we start inquiring into the past, the patient recollects much of what has happened in the past and reacts to those elements as it is enacted in the present with the therapist. So the processes that manifest as a consequence are transference and countertransference, which play a very important therapeutic role in psychotherapy. So as much as the past of the patient is important, the past of the therapist also influences the therapeutic process. When a patient starts narrating about various kinds of traumatic events in the past, The therapist also recollects and reverberates within himself as to what kind of issues he or she might have faced. So his responses to the patient's past is also influenced by his own past. And that is a very important aspect that we'll have to highlight. When the therapist starts responding to the patient's past based on his own past experiences, there can be several blind spots. And that's why the importance of supervision in therapy. And thirdly, the issue of abreaction. See, abreaction can occur spontaneously, as you nicely explained. And if you're dealing with the highly painful, traumatic experiences in the past, you try and slowly evoke emotional reactions associated with that. And that is one other kind of an abreaction. And the third kind of abreaction is a planned abreaction. The greatest example of that is the empty chair. You plan an abreaction in therapy as a therapeutic initiative. So abreaction has a wide canvas and plays again an essential part in the therapeutic process. So thank you once again for your narration and with your characteristics embellishment with literary anecdotes. Before I wind up, we often use the word digging into the past, which really unsettles me. Therapist doesn't dig into the past. The therapist facilitates recollection of the past by encouraging spontaneous narration of the client. Kindly get this metaphor of digging into the past, because what it implies is the therapist actively goes and starts digging, right, to uncover the thing. The patient, you facilitate uncovering by your own empathic responses, facilitating narration. Thank you once again, Ajit, and all the persons associated with it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah,
Dr. Pratima?
Thank you, everyone. Privilege is, yes. Can you?
Hello.
Okay.
Network is breaking.
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay, before till Dr. Pratima joins in, announcement.
There's some problem with our audio.
Okay, Dr. There's a problem with the audio.
Yeah.
Okay, on behalf of the IPS Subcommittee for Psychotherapy, I thank you all for joining us. We'll keep the programs going. Thank Dr. Bhide, Dr. Gurdani, Dr. Raghuram sir, Dr. TSS, everybody else who's taken time off for the Sunday to come and join and be part of the program. Our next program will be on the 11th of July. We are going to have Dr. Rajiv Mehta as a speaker. It's going to be a simple topic on communication. And then, following that, we will be going into topics of on psychoanalysis and psychodynamic psychotherapy following the communication lecture. So the next program is on 11th, so you can block your calendar for listening into Dr. Rajiv Mehta, who's also written a lovely book. Let's look forward to hearing him too. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Bhide. Thank you, Dr. Gurnani. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Raghuram. Bye. And thank you, Torrent.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for hosting it.
You can end it. The control is in your system, ma'am.
Okay, I'll do that.
Should we take leave? Okay then. Thank you.
So
Thank
it's,
you very much.
so it's good to see you.
Huh. Nice. Thanks for inviting
It's nice
me,
to
and
see
it's good that I'm back to some workforce.
We are
Okay
going to
then. Thank
catch
you.
you for the behavior therapy.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Have a good day. All the best. Thank you.
People are leaving one by one. Thank you so much, ma'am. It was
Thank you, Tushar. Thank you so much.
more than 100 Sunday and
Yeah.
that back to
Yeah.
back webinars.
Yeah.
It's
And
raining.
that's a Sunday morning.
Yeah, webinar is raining actually.
In Bombay.
No, webinar is raining, I'm saying. Because yesterday, I think in Nagpur itself, there was one webinar. And
Yes, there were plenty of webinars, 6 or 7.
so
Uh, you get drained out also after so many webinars.
11th will be next program.
11th will be.
Okay, so we have ample time in this.
Yeah.
You can end it because you are the host, ma'am. Or
Yeah.
I can also end it.